Welcome to Booked All Night Season 2. Each week, Jess, Katie, and Maggie launch into new worlds, discover amazing characters, and bring you the best bookish discussions under the stars. We're a cozy little corner of the internet, so be sure to leave a comment and join the polls after each episode. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Alright, my little Libranauts, grab a seat, grab a book, and join us as we explore some new pages. Before we dive into today's episode, we want to provide a brief trigger warning. This episode discusses topics that may be distressing for some listeners. We encourage you to take care of yourself and skip this episode if you feel it may be triggering. Your well-being is important to us. Thank you for listening.
Iron Widow is based on Wu Zhan, or Wu Zetian, the only female empress of China. And it's specifically, not a historical reimagining. It's kind of like... I'm pretty certain the author has, given an actual verbiage to what their intentions were with how it was. It actually might be in the trigger warning at the beginning of the book.
I do remember it was about specifically, I should have found the TikTok or something, but it was very specifically written when Xiran was disappointed with the ending of I think it was an anime. I can't remember off the top of my head anymore. It was a couple years ago. And they were like, this ending sucks. I'm going to fix it. And then Iron Widow was born.
Lovely. I did find it. It is part of the opening. This book is not historical fantasy or alternate history, but a futuristic story set in an entirely different world, inspired by cultural elements from across Chinese history and featuring historical figures reimagined in vastly different life circumstances. And if you have ever played any of the Dynasty Warrior games, you are absolutely going to recognize these characters because the Dynasty Warrior games are all Chinese history. So I'm like, hey, I know how to pronounce that one. Not the rest of them, though. So I had to look that up. Xiran Jay Zhao does have a TikTok video up on their TikTok and their socials that do walk you through how to pronounce these names. So we will do our best, although in the history of us pronouncing things correctly, we're O for however many times we've tried to do that. So just, bear with us.
We will do our Caucasian best.
The big ones, I think, for today, we have Wu Zetian, Yizhu, which is Yizhi, Yizhu, and the Hundwin, and then Yangwan. And Huaxia is the world that we are in.
Oh, I'm not going to get any of these. Jesus Christ.
I tried so hard, man. I hope I have done that justice. I'm certain that I have mutilated it, so I'll just apologize for that now. I want to start with a discussion about what is young adult lit, because this is something else that Xiran Jay Zhao has brought up on their socials, that their intention was not to write a young adult book. That when they were sitting down to write it, they weren't like, oh, this will be perfect for a 16-year-old audience. And so I want to be clear that what happens a lot, especially to genre fiction writers and to women writers, is that all of their stuff kind of gets pigeonholed into young adult. And this is not the first book to have done that. Another one that was very popular was the Court of Thorns and Roses series. When it was first released, they marketed it as young adult. And that's one of the big titles that people bring up when they're talking about sex and, sex, drugs, and rock and roll in young adult books, because the sex scenes in those books were graphic. And a lot of the things that have happened thus far in the first 10 chapters here are graphic, although this one has not, they didn't reach a sexual point in these. But I do know that for Heavenly Tyrant, there is a page.
There is indeed a pegging scene.
The author has come out with I need an updated version or a special sticker to make it clear who's getting pegged here. So
they have made 2 or 3 separate TikToks about the headache it's been for them to try and urge their publisher to reprint the next edition, including the clarification. And I think that's just so funny. There was one, I did see one stitch where someone was like, I made a clear sticker and I printed it onto the page with the addendum.
And I think it's funny because apparently it's a mix-up over 2 words. And so some people are like, wait, who's getting pegged and who's doing the pegging? And I'm like, wait, young adult literature. uh,
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure, like, Iron Widow initially released in 2021.
yes.
And they had been trying to make new adult a thing that kind of, like, came to a head during the pandemic years,
Yeah.
I think. And I would, knowing how this book goes and knowing the author's intent, I 100% would say this is a new adult.
Yeah.
One, because the main character is 18.
Yes.
Two, a lot of the things that do occur are incredibly mature in topic, which is not to say that young adult doesn't cover these topics. It does. But specifically, I'm thinking of the pegging scene in the sequel that we're going to at one point come across. And it's very much, it's the same like you were saying, like with ACOTAR. The graphic nature of those scenes is what pushes it away from young adult. And young adult does have sex scenes. There are plenty of YA books with sex scenes, but a lot of them are either fade to black or very vague in description.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up a Court of Thorns and Roses as well, because I don't see the issue of book 1 being categorized as young adult.
That's true.
In that series.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think that it's fair that it was categorized as young adult when it first came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I kind of feel, based off the 10 chapters that we've read, only on the 10 chapters, I kind of feel the same for Iron Widow, where it's not very super graphic, it's not very, crazy in-depth, where it's just like, oh, I don't want my young adult child to read this,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think in A Court of Thorns and Roses series, book 2 and on, and definitely the last book, I definitely would not characterize in YA.
Right.
And I think that's why women writers and people who write these kinds of stories get pigeonholed, because you kind of need that time to develop the relationships and the characters and get to those sort of scenes. I wouldn't say you need time, but like it feels better when it's like over time and they're getting to know each other and then they're getting into that relationship and you're seeing everything fall into place. But that's so hard because the first book, it's just like, here's YA. And then the second book, you're like, oh, it's not YA. You know?
Yeah, I think the other issue is that a lot of people, like not just publishers, but people in general, be like, well, the character is 17, so she's a young adult.
She's 17 and a girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's 17 and a girl, so it's a young adult book. And while, yes, the age of the protagonist matters, so does the voice and the content. And part of the issue with what we're labeling as young adult is that kids read up. So the young adult audience includes a 12-year-old. So for that reason is part of what the argument against Court of Thorns and Roses being young adult is because part of the audience is a 12-year-old. And you would not want your 12-year-old reading something that says outright, he sheathed himself inside of me. That's not something that a 12-year-old needs to be reading. That's above and beyond. But the older part of young adult is 16, 17, 18. And I don't know that anybody can look me in the eye and tell me that 16, 17, and 18-year-olds are not having sex. And so I don't feel the urge to be like, well, it shouldn't be there so that they don't get the idea. I think that's stupid. They're going to do it regardless. But I think there needs to be a drastic overhaul of what we consider young adult literature, because a 12-year-old and an 18-year-old should not be in the same category.
Agreed.
And there's so much in children's lit, right? Because young adult is children's lit. When you are writing for this audience, you are writing really nichely. So while, yes, young adult is 12 to 18, ultimately you're going to be like, well, I want to write for the younger side of that, which means your audience is like 12 to 14-year-olds. And again, a 12-year-old is not a 14-year-old. And they have wildly different feelings about that. And your audience reads up. So even though you're like, okay, well, I'm thinking about a 12 to 14-year-old person, whoever you're writing about, the reality is your audience is actually younger, because you're going to have precocious readers that are reading up. You're going to have people trying to get them to increase their reading skills. And so, yes, my target audience is a 12-year-old, but the reality is that my actual audience is going to include like an 8-year-old. And it makes it very complicated and nuanced. And angering as well, because it's not the young adult, new adult crossover is not the only place where the American market specifically has failed, because the UK market and the Australian market still have new adult as a category. So when we get books and the character is like 18 to 20-ish or in college, like we did for Remember Me Tomorrow, where she's a freshman in college. Here in the US, it's a young adult book, but everywhere else it's a new adult book because
she's a new adult.
She's a new adult, is right.
And in the US market specifically, new adult is only really still a category for digital books, for indie publishers.
Yeah.
A lot of a lot of like straight to Kindle releases can be in that new adult frame. But this week, as of this recording, Xiran has gone on to TikTok to mention that they do in fact regret writing down into YA, because initially they were going to make it a lot more than what it currently is. So the reason it reads YA is because they were basically forced to parse down by their, I don't remember if it was their agent or their editor that they specified in the TikTok, because I have a brain made of soup and I can't remember details.
Yay, soup.
And they were basically forced to cut it down to be YA palatable, when they had wanted it to be a lot more graphic, a lot more, not graphic necessarily, but a lot more mature.
Yeah. And like just the list of like accolades that this book has is insane, but most of them are for young adult. And the young adult audience is wild, right? Because if they like a book, that book and that series and that author will succeed. They'll go out of their way, right? But so it was a New York Times bestseller, a USA Today bestseller, Indigo #1 Teen Book of the Year in 21, winner of the Barnes & Noble YA Book Award in 22, winner of the Amy Mathers Teen Book Award in 22, winner of the Arlene Barlin Award for Best Science Fiction and Fantasy 22, a finalist for the Andre Norton Nebula Award in 21, a finalist for the Lodestar Award for Best Young Adult Book in 22, a finalist for the Locus Awards for Young Adult Novel and First Novel in 2022, one of Book Riot's 20 best science fiction books of all time, and a New York Public Library best book for teens. And I think that's wild. I'm so glad that like their book is doing so well. But I share in the frustration because when I go to conventions, right, I went to AWP not last year, in 21 because it was out in Philly, and there were people sitting on young adult panels because they had young adult books out, and they couldn't tell you what made it young adult. Because in their own words, they were like, well, I had a young protagonist, and so my publisher said that it is young adult. And I'm like, great. So why am I here wasting my time trying to further my craft as someone that wants to write young adult when you clearly don't know what it is for a book to be young adult?
Mm-hmm.
And I also think adding to that frustration and that confusion is also parenting style as well. Because what I may allow my child to read at a certain age, other parents may not do the same, right? Yeah. So if I thought my child at 12 or 13 was mature enough to read the first book in A Court of Thorns and Roses, or depending on how this book turns out, because again, we're only chapter 10.
Yeah.
I might say, hey, you can read it, but let's have a discussion afterwards. Or if you have any questions, let's talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas another parent might say, no, you can't read that because it has
XYZ. Yeah.
Right. And I think that makes it so hard too, because what are we allowing our children to read? And that also goes in the case of banned books. Like
that's also part of the complicated nature of children's lit is that I'm not only writing to appease my audience, which is in fact a child. I'm also writing to appease a parent and a teacher and a librarian who would then give that book to a child or a teen. And again, even outside of parents, the adults in that audience's life will dictate what they get to read.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Unless you're like me and you snuck in every smut book you can into the house.
Or me with a language barrier, so my parents don't know exactly what I'm reading about. But if the cover is, passable in public, they won't know. And I remember I was like 15 or 16. I read my very first book on page sex. And I personally was ashamed and guilty of reading it, that I shoved the book behind my bookshelf, because I was like, I should not be, I don't want to this is just so awkward. What if they know? Meanwhile, the front of the book is just like one of those like paperback, like quilted colors of like just like a bow or something, and like you could not tell from looking at the cover that it had to do with a girl having sex in college. And I was like, okay.
I don't know if anyone is familiar with the Anita Blake series.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So the first one is like pretty tame compared to the rest of the series, very much in the same that like ACOTAR is tame and compared to the rest of the series. And my friend Lauren got me into them. She's like, wow, it's like all supernatural stuff, and she's a detective, and she winds up sleeping with this guy. I'm like, okay, I'll read it. And the sex scene, the first book is like, yes, that is sex. Okay, I'm definitely awkward. By the time you get to like the 6th book, almost every chapter has sex in it. And I had full access to this because my parents also didn't know what I was reading. There's no parental controls on print media. You know, like I would say a lot of kids today have e-readers, and there's still like the argument of where it's like, well, do you want your Kindle or do you want the physical book? And there's a lot of people that are still like, I want a trophy on my bookshelf and access to my entire library on a Kindle. Yeah. And I mean, it still rings true. Like if you give a kid $20 and they go into the store, they can get whatever book they want to get. And unless you are there with them reading the back copy and like pulling out your phone and being like, is there sex in blah, blah, blah title?
Yeah. Not to mention like misshelving books. Like when that book Icebreaker came out like 2 years ago, and because of its cartoon soft pastel color palette on the front cover, it was constantly shelved in the children's section because they're like, oh, this is just a cute little book about hockey. No.
Yeah.
That is smut right there.
Yeah. A lot of the hockey books actually have like really cute illustrated pastel covers, but like their titles are like Puck Around.
Yes.
You know, like, and I'm like, oh, gee, that's definitely not a children's title. And the other thing on that is, okay, even if it was shelved in the children's section, okay, but if it's young enough to be like in the children's section, mom and or dad or grandma and or grandpa should be there with them and should look at the back copy, which comes back to an issue of like gatekeepers not gatekeeping correctly and then yelling at somebody that made it. And it's like, I didn't go around telling your 12-year-old to read hockey smut. I wrote hockey smut, and you didn't read the back copy because you judged a book by the cover, and you were like, wow, so cute.
So to pivot back to Iron Widow, I don't know if kind of excited, very interested in seeing this difference, because this is one of the first authors that we have not quite a direct line to, but like they are very active on their social media.
Oh, so active.
There does not go a day where I don't see a Xiran TikTok. Today, I think I saw like 2 or 3 in a row. So they are very much active and in our space, or we're in their space, I guess. And it's something that we have like this almost live connection as we're reading this, because a lot of the other books have been either people who don't have a social media presence, people who are new authors, or someone who doesn't keep a very active social media presence. Meanwhile, Xiran is very much active all the time and very much in on the memes. And how that's going to relate to our reading is I'm interested to see.
I'm laughing because I also saw one of their videos today, and it was specifically about what page to put the sticker on for who gets pegged. So it's like, yes, they're very active about telling me who pegged who. Very important information. So we open up, we have the prologue, there's battle and war happening, and it took me a while to get through the prologue because the writing style in that does not match where we start even chapter 1. Right. And so I was like, Maggie, what are you making me read? How dare you? And I almost put it down after that because I was like, it wasn't the same. I'm not going to compare it to the Mike Brink issue.
Oh, God. Yeah.
But I was definitely getting the vibe of, I was like, if it continues like this, I'm not going to be able to make it very far, and that's going to suck. But the actual opening line I really I love the chapter titles. They're very sassy. I love the voice that Zetian has. The opening line, of course, is, for 18 years, my unibrow has saved me from being sold into a painful, terrifying death. And I'm like, okay, this is much different than what I just read in the prologue, which only makes me double down on hating prologues. I don't know if I have said that enough on the podcast, but prologues suck, and I hate them.
See, I disagree.
You disagree about prologues?
Partially, yes, but also, I think prologues have their place. A prologue is never going to make me put down a book unless the narration is killing me. And yeah, the first time that I read Iron Widow, it also gave me pause because I didn't get into it until chapter 2.
Same.
But in rereading this, because I have read Iron Widow before, and I loved it, and it was my recommendation for the podcast, especially because Heavenly Tyrant came out recently. But I liked this prologue because of what I know about the next couple of chapters. Because I know who the girl is. I know the situation. I already have a bit of a grasp on why this particular prologue is important. Especially because of the way that it sets up the thinking of outside of our narrator. Because Zetian is our narrator. And she is very angry the entire time. Her entire thing is her entire life is run by spite at this point, and I know that's why you would love it.
Yes,
but
very close to my heart. I love her for that. She is, however, deranged.
Yes, absolutely. 100%. I love it, and it only gets better. But this prologue, because it's from Yang Guang's point of view, because it's the male pilot in charge of the Yang Guan, because it is Yang Guan's point of view, and they're the Chrysalis pilot, they're in charge of the giant furry mecha, and the way that he refers to specifically the female co-pilot, as the concubine and a necessary sacrifice and all that. He doesn't remember her name. And he doesn't remember any of the other concubine pilots' names that he's had. And I feel like it really sets up the world in terms of their relation to women.
Yeah.
Because that is a big thing in this book, is the inequality between male and female pilots and the way that women are treated and female, and girls in general are treated and seen. And we even see that in the first chapter or two where we get Zetian having a makeover. Essentially, she gets her eyebrows threaded by a friend,
Iju,
and Iju, and she can't even make it home because she's got lotus feet, where they break the foot and keep breaking it so that you have these tiny little pretty dainty feet, but they are infected, stinky. They are full of fungal growth, and it is painful. She can't walk. And she hobbles. She totters. She doesn't walk at all. And I just thought that sort of dichotomy between the first chapter or two and the prologue worked for me at the very least.
Let me tell you that when I read about everything freezing over and her grandmother making her walk on ice, I was like, oh, I know where this is going. Because one of my favorite authors is Lisa C. She writes a lot about Chinese culture, and there's never a book that does not have feet binding in it when it comes to her. And I have read worse descriptions than this book, and where I almost vomited while reading it. But I knew where I was like, oh, she's walking on ice. They're numbing her feet. We're doing this. And it's still crazy. It still throws me for a loop. Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I greatly appreciate it, though, because there are so many things nowadays that pull from different cultures, but they only pull the pretty parts of these cultures.
Right.
And so I feel like this is a very honest look at Chinese culture, as particularly from somebody who has an actual connection to Chinese culture, and not just hey, I'm a white girl and I happen to like Chinese aesthetic, and so I'm going to write a book. This is from their family, not their family life, but their heritage. Like, this is something that they're connected to.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Although sometimes I forget that she has bound feet because of the way of the writing and, oh, I walked here or I walked there. Like when she's like in action.
Mm-hmm.
And I know like when she's walking home, she's saying like, oh, the pain shoots up my legs and, you know, I'm waddling, I'm teetering. And those are great. But then we have the action scenes where like it just seems kind of like completely forgotten. And then we're brought back to it.
Yeah, there was the scene when she finally gets to meet Young Guan, and she fights against going with him after the siren goes off that the Hundwins are there, and she's like, I'm kicking and I'm punching and I'm fighting, and he ultimately just like throws me on my back and everything else. That, I think, was definitely a scene where they could have been, but one of the parts of her ultimately connecting to the fox was that she finally got to walk without feeling the pain. And so when she came out of that connection, she's like, that's back. Crap. Like, so I thought that was nice because it wasn't something she noticed until she came out of that connection. Mm-hmm. But I do agree that some of the language around when Zhexian is walking could focus more on the fact that she's not walking, she's hobbling.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's only so many times that we can have that brought up before we're complaining about, oh, anyone can betray anyone. Oh, she's hobbling kind of situation.
She's got an old football injury that allows her to see colors and shapes and special patterns. Yeah.
I think it's been a good balance that's been struck so far between reminding us that, yes, she's got bound feet and she can't walk well, that she is disabled, and being able to progress the story and to the next plot point, essentially, without harping on the disability and the pain necessarily. I think it strikes a good balance of reminding us when we need to, like especially when she gets out of the chrysalis for the first time and she suddenly remembers, oh yeah, walking sucks.
I think I will need to read another 10 chapters to really comment whether I feel that it's balanced or not, because it was definitely something that I noticed, as well as Katie did, that it was just like, well, are you walking or are you hobbling? Because like there is a difference. As somebody that hobbles around because of my back pain and leg issues, like there are days that I do it a little bit better, but I'm ultimately not walking the same way that somebody else is, and I wouldn't call the movement that I do walking.
There was a scene that was depicted where I felt like, as it was written, it felt like she was kind of like running a bit. And then I had to be like, no, she can't be running because her feet are bound, you know, and it felt a little I don't want to say it was inconsistent. I'm just saying like just a tad bit, you know, like.
It was the little thing that brought you out. Yeah. Right.
That I had to stop and think and be like, no, okay, her feet are bound, so she's not doing what I think she's doing.
Was it when she was running in the rice paddy? Well, she's not running in the rice paddy, but she's like trying to get home before her curfew and a battle starts and the earthquake happens and it like knocks her down.
No, I think it was more along the lines of the bridge where she's going. Like, I might be wrong. I'm probably
because
wrong.
Both times she's on the bridge. The first time, Young Guan
is carried.
She's carried.
Is basically fireman carried, and then the second time when she comes back out of the chrysalis after the fight is over, and after she reveals she's murdered Young Guan, the most popular and the strongest, second strongest, basically chrysalis pilot.
You didn't say that laughing maniacally enough that she murdered Young Guan.
She did laugh maniacally and says your nightmare has arrived.
Yeah.
when she does, and then she's dragged bodily by the other pilots and then later guards.
Yeah.
But I do recall her hurrying after she fell in the rice field. I remember I don't know if it was mentioned much about after she first met Young Guan. After she got prettied up with all the other potential concubines, and she had mentioned, all the other girls also have bound feet.
Yeah.
And then when he takes her back home before the alarm goes off about the Hundun attack.
Hundwin.
Is that not what I said? I'm sorry, I'm trying.
That's okay. In my head when I'm reading it's Hundun. So
Hundun.
I also read it as Hundun in my head.
The first time I saw it, I read it as Hundun, but I read it as Hundun like the Law and Order theme. So I was like, Hundun.
dun dun. But I will. Okay, so can we talk about this other part that confused me? And I'm hoping it's answered in the latter part of the book, because when you have the two pilots, right? You have the yin and the yang, and they're is it ki? They're ki.
They're chi.
Okay, their chi is what's powering this chrysalis, right? And in the prologue, we see that, I'm not even going to attempt it, the pilot is using the arms and breaking off the lances from the tail and doing all this stuff, right? And we see that when our main character takes over as well, right? She's piloting, and it's harder for her to. But before that point, before she kills the male pilot, she's in his head realm, right?
Yeah.
So he creates this realm for the concubines, and she's in a jungle. She hears a child crying. She sees peaches with like faces on them that are the other concubines, and she's
Which is
smashing
weird.
them. It was so weird. So we're in this, and right, she has to battle her way out of the realm, and he's also in there too, because he's trying to stop her from surviving. And I don't understand that, because he's in that realm, but he's also piloting this big ass chrysalis, this big ass mecha Gundam, if you will.
Oh yeah, his like split consciousness was really weird.
Yeah, the way that I read it is that he's got his physical body in the fox, in the chrysalis, right? And there's like a second like ephemeral plane where he is in charge. He's got full faculties, and he's using his chi in like this sort of kind of ethereal plane where it's where he connects to the fox. And then there's like the dream world, quote unquote, I think, where it's his subconscious, and it's trying to subdue her in a way to like get her to hand over her chi so that she can't be in control, because it's trying to trap her, it's trying to like mislead her, trying to get her to stay. And she's like, no, I gotta get out of here. I gotta murder this child, and then murder the future version of him, the real version of him.
And she does that, but she does that in the brain realm, if you will. She basically kills him there and kills him physically.
Yeah. Just to make sure, because it's not dead until you stab it 15 times. It's very important.
Because I think the initial fight with the kid is she's trying to get out of the jungle first before she can deal with him in this ethereal plane, the secondary sort of plane where they're connected to the fox. And then that is you die in the dream, you die in real life kind of situation. Like, yeah.
My thing again is because we see how she's trying to pilot, and it's really hard for her. Like, she doesn't know what she's doing. She can't get it to move. She can't get anything. So it's like, I'm trying to think about, and I'm sure it's because his chi power was so high and he was so used to it and had been doing it for 5 years. So it came naturally. But it's just like, how could he have split his mind and dealt with her while doing, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think he was aware of what was happening in the dreamscape.
I thought he was, because he was telling her to stop and give up. And
I thought that was just more like the subconscious need. And then because he was like, oh, what are you doing out of here, after she, shows up out of the dream world after she's killed the kid.
Yeah, that's why it kind of felt like there was like a split consciousness to it, because that kid is definitely focused on keeping her there. And I feel like that is something that he would have had to focus on as well, that like this dream world has to be here so that the concubine is not bothering me or whatever. Yeah. And then she gets into that, and that's why he's surprised, because he's like, oh, you should have been in there. But it's definitely something that I think it at least feels like he was concentrating on. And then to note on her taking over the fox, I'm torn about that, because as it starts, right, she's fumbling and she can't get it to move. She can barely open her mouth to respond to things.
It's also duct taped. I totally forgot about that too. She couldn't respond to things because her mouth was duct taped.
Yeah. And she's just like concentrating, trying to help and get things out. Well, help. But I didn't want her to succeed there, so I am a little like that she managed to figure out how to pilot the suit when we have never seen her learn to use her chi or had any indication that she would have learned to use that. She's also very knowledgeable about it, which seems really weird given that she like grew up in rice paddies, and she constantly talks about how she was a peasant. It doesn't seem like that would be a peasant education.
But she was on the tablet of her friend and they were discussing things, and I feel like some of her knowledge came from him because she would like literally study on his college, the tablet that the college gave him. Not that I think that's enough for her to know how to pilot.
Yeah.
But I had the same reserve, but then I kind of just let it go because she found out that like if she gets angry enough, her chi will just build up and release, right? And so
angry enough, she starts at angry, man. She's just enraged on page 1. Are you kidding me?
Right.
I think a part of it is also that chi is supposed to be like your life force. It's supposed to be your internal energy, like your mental strength. That's how they measure it. They measure it as your mental strength, right? And she has a very high score compared to all the other girls who are like in the 80s and the 60s, and she's got like 600 something.
Oh yeah, she's 600. The next highest is like 118, and then everybody else is like 2 digits.
Yeah, something like that. And I think part of it is sort of like an instinctual thing. Like, yeah, she doesn't know how to pilot this. She doesn't know how to connect. She doesn't know how to make the chrysalis move. But part of it is also like this intrinsic internal magic, as it were. And I give it some leeway because of that. And also because, she's the main character. She's supposed to be able to be this strong person. And it kind of gets touched on a little bit in like chapter 9. Where she's like, where she's being questioned by like the state security, and they're like, "How did you manage to lie to the spirit pressure tests that like you suppressed all your spirit pressure?" They think she's got much higher pressure than she actually does. Like her score should have been higher.
Now, here's a question: do you think like the chi energy like of the dead concubines kind of add to the chi of the pilot, like after they die? Because I mean, I don't know if that's answered later in the book, but that's how I feel like maybe she was able to kind of pilot it a little bit better because the male pilot had such a high spirit rating.
Yeah, and she there is like a line in there that she's like trying to siphon it from him.
Yeah. And that was my other question when she was in this brain realm, this jungle realm of his. It's just like, but if you combine your like, and that's what they're supposed to do, right? Like, you're supposed to find your balance. You're supposed to find the concubine who balances your power, right?
Yeah.
So you can fight better and you become the Iron Prince and the Iron Princess.
You were supposed to bring balance to the Force.
If I were remembering correctly, it gets touched on a little bit, and it in the last like 2 chapters, it's also kind of brought up. But it's also been like 4 years since I've read the book, so I don't remember exactly.
I was just thinking while reading it, like, what if you stop trapping her in there and let her help you co-pilot?
Also, my other thought there too was like, okay, so hers is 600, the next highest is 118, the other ones are all like pittance by comparison.
Right, I think the average is like 50, 54.
Yeah, so like what the hell is the point? Because wouldn't you rather be looking for like concubine pilots that could add to your power? And like,
exactly.
If you've got one that's 600 versus one that's like 12, why is she still here?
Why wouldn't you want to keep her around?
Yeah, like...
It's almost like the system is working as intended.
The system is dumb.
The system was never made to be equal.
Yeah.
But like, that's a thing, like, because when she gets... after she kills Yang Guang, she gets arrested. She's questioned by the State Department. She realizes that like they're trying to bury her, or like no one's going to be able to run the fight on like news broadcasts because they're all bought out by the military. And she's like, how many other Iron Princesses have they buried?
I was under the impression that only through like that true yin-yang relationship could you earn those titles, and because she killed her male pilot, she's the Iron Widow. And she does note that there's a title for it, which means there have been others.
Others, yeah.
I like that she's smart.
Yes.
I want to put that out there. That like things happen, and I don't feel like I need to yell at her yet.
I think we're just very freshly wounded still from Rebel Witch and everyone being very dumb all the time. But yeah, that has always been my favorite Xiran characteristic, is her smartness and also her derangedness.
On the note of Rebel Witch, if the ending of either of these books suck, I am holding you personally responsible.
I cannot be held responsible for the second book. I have not read it. This book, though, I screamed a lot when it ended, but that was just because I wanted book 2 immediately.
Well, good news. We have book 2.
4 years away. We do have book 2, but we're not going to get to it for like 2 months.
Yay!
Can I just also say, I just want to applaud the author, because in this book, we have a family who is horrible to their children, right? They beat them, they sell them to the military, all this shit. And
Yay.
hold on, I'm not done, right? And
yay,
then,
we love terrible families here.
And the daughter, instead of saying like, oh, they're just my parents, they'll come to love me, and hopefully, she's like, you know what? I don't feel bad for what I'm about to do, because y'all are going to be murdered too, and y'all deserve it. And then on top of that, none of them like ever say like, oh, I was just doing it so that I didn't get attached because we knew we didn't have money or whatever, and I actually love you or something. They're still horrible when she leaves. And I'm like, I have never encountered that in a book yet, where the family is horrible and stays horrible, and then the children want revenge, you know? And I'm just happy.
I really like that when she was leaving, or there was a point when she was still with her family where she was like, if my mother says this one thing, or if she shows some kind of remorse or other emotion, I will forgive her. And instead her mother's like, oh, you should do this instead to make yourself, prettier and more, whatever it was. I forget exactly.
Her mom specifically turns around and compliments her eyebrows. She's like, oh my God, there's 2 of them. And then like, that's the only thing that she says to her. And Session's just like, you know what?
She's like, you listen to my advice. You look beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my favorite quote when she's with the new pilot, Leigh, the one who murdered his family.
Le Chemin.
Yeah.
Le
It's almost like an R sound, like le.
Him. That one. Because they bring him out, he's chained, he's got like the muzzle on, he's like Bane with the, I was born, right? You know, she literally looks at him and says, hey, did they deserve it? And I was just like, yes, I love that, because she knows her family deserves what she was intending for them, to have happen. And she's like, hey, were your parents just as horrible? Did they deserve all the murder?
Yeah. And she like says it with a smile on her face too. Yeah. She's like, did they?
Did they? It? Yeah.
Woo! Like, yeah. She's batshit.
Horrible family party. Woo!
Yeah. I love that part. Because as you're saying, in a lot of books, like the family comes around pretty easily, and I'm like, that has never been my experience with my family. We hold on to shit for years. Final thoughts. I am going to read the next 10.
I'm excited to see your guys' reactions to the next couple of the rest of the book, essentially. I don't remember specifics about the book. I remember how it ends. I remember there are bits and pieces that I really, really, really loved, and I think y'all will love too, but I don't remember details, and I cannot spoil a character's true identity.
I was going to say, it's really important that you get yourself an advanced reader copy and spoil something with just a few names. And just ruin the whole reading experience.
I'm still mad at you for that.
Good thing I don't remember a thing.
But before ruining it, it's really important that you go out of your way trying not to ruin anything, so that when you do ruin the big reveal like the biggest possible thing.
You should have just had me read from my book first. That would have solved it.
Should have.
Hey, Katie, what do you have on your page?
Yep. Boom.
And now we always have the same edition, or at the very least, similar editions.
It's important.
I'm just excited to keep reading. I love this book. I don't want to stop. It does that thing where you get to the end of the chapter and you're like, I don't even notice the next chapter has started because I'm so invested. Unlike Rebel Witch, where you go to the next chapter and you don't realize it because the chapter you just finished is half a page long.
I will say, I think a big part of what took me so long to get through it was that we just went Heartless Hunter, Rebel Witch, where the chapters were like a single page. And I'm like, what is this? Why am I still here? And they're like only like 10-page chapters here. They're really not like excessive. But I was like, oh my God, there's so much to it.
It did make me read earlier on in the week, because usually I save the reading until like the day before or the morning of, so it's fresher in my mind. But I was like, oh, I read the first like 2 chapters and I was like, oh, this took a lot longer than Rebel Witch did. I'm going to probably need to read it throughout the week. Still not the case. I can finish 2 chapters in like 15 minutes, but still.
Yeah, I can't. I gotta make sure to actually read earlier in the week. I woke up early today to read 8 chapters. I read very slow. This was not as fast for me as the last couple of books that we've done. But I think that's more a me problem and less the writing.
So my final thoughts kind of go in with that, with the whole chapter thing, right? Like the reading early, because what I did is I say, 10 chapters are like, the total is like 100 page, right? So it ends on page 100. I'm like, if I split that up into 5 days, I can read 20 pages a night. That's doable. It's easy. Well, the prologue in the first chapter, I was just like, I don't know if I really want to read on. It's not really grabbing me a whole lot.
And she murders a guy.
And then second chapter and on, I was just like, I'm on chapter 10. Oh no, I can only read this chapter. I can't go on. Like I want to go on, but I can't,
that was how my first read through went too. I was like, I read the first, like the prologue in the first chapter. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to like this a lot. And then I get to like, after she leaves, after she's taken, and I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. I'm 100% invested. I will finish this in a day if I don't pace myself.
It absolutely picks up, and I just didn't realize how much I was reading in one sitting, and I was like, oh, time for bed, and I'm over my 20-page mark. Great,
I have to physically put the book away. Like I have to be so mindful of it that I'm not reading ahead, because that's just how invested I get into it.
And that's how you spoil a book, Jessica.
Hooray! Terrible families.
Did I deserve it?
Did you deserve it, Katie?
What are your guys' predictions for the next couple of chapters? This next set.
Pegging? No, I don't know. I don't know, because I don't feel like enough of the story outside of the war has been set up in these 10 chapters, so I don't really have a lot to speculate through. I think, given the chunk that is left of this book, that, she's probably going to murder a lot more people, and do it happily with a big old smile on her face, like, ha 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 ha, murder and blood and slashing throats. But I don't know why. I think, based on the character that she is based on, the historical figure, I imagine she will become a prominent figure in the military. Otherwise, I don't understand why she's also on the second book cover.
So, my prediction originally was every pilot that she was paired up with, she was going to murder until they realized, like, just give her own goddamn chrysalis and let her fight. But then I went back to where they're describing, like, the 9-tailed fox, right? And you have all the...
Oh, my book doesn't have those illustrations.
Oh, yeah, no, I got illustrations. We got all the concept art and shit.
Here's the vermilion bird.
Yeah.
I have the hardcover, so I don't have the illustrations. The only thing I have in the book as an illustration is the elemental guide between metal, wood.
Oh, no, we got more. I'll take pictures and send them to you.
It tells you the pilots. So,
okay.
So because I see that she is the in pilot to the Vermilion Bird, I feel like because of her comments at the beginning of when she's in the Vermilion Bird, when she's going into the Vermilion Bird, and she's like, hey, you have a horrible family, did they deserve it, sort of thing. And I feel like he's going to connect with her because of their past, because of their family and their terrible histories. And maybe he lets her kind of take over the piloting, right? So this is very detailed. This is my whole theory, and I'm probably all wrong. But he lets her take over the piloting, and then they stage a coup, and they start like taking out other pilots or whatever, and then she basically somehow runs the military at the end, because with his help, because they're going to be Iron Prince and Iron Princess, and they're going to be like the nightmares.
I think if they do connect at all, it's only going to be through hate.
Yeah, that's an important thing to know, is that this book and this duology really is not enemies to lovers, it's just enemies with benefits.
That's a wrap on this episode of Booked All Night. We'd love for you to be a part of the conversation, so don't forget to rate the show, drop a comment, and share your thoughts in the episode poll. And remember, subscribing means you'll never miss an episode or interview as we launch into more amazing stories together. Booked All Night is produced by Rob Cook and his cats. So when you share your favorite episode, be sure to tag us at Booked All Night Pod on Threads, Instagram, and Facebook, and say hi to our guy in the sound booth. For more information, like reading schedules and dates on our upcoming interviews, check out the link in the show notes. That's link.bio/bookedallnight. lnk.bio/bookedallnight for those of you who don't check the show notes. Until next time, my little Libernauts, this is Jessica Mary, Kay Leigh, Magdalyn Ann, and producer Rob signing off and reminding you to stay booked all night.